today I'm going to make a video about my pregnancy. My little boy Castor he's just over 5 months old now, so I'm seeing on my Instagram and like on my phone pictures and reminders and things coming up from this time last year when I was in the early stages of pregnancy, and it was like reminding me of some of the things that I've been through, because as I'm sure a lot of you know, after you've kind of been through it a year on, you've had the baby, you've gone through labour, you've got a small baby to look after, kind of quickly forget about a lot of the symptoms and a lot of the things you go through. But I know that when I was pregnant, it was really helpful to see other people, especially online and things, going through similar situations, especially because I was pregnant during lockdown. So I didn't feel like I had a massive amount of support. I had like people in my family and things that I could speak to and contact, but not everybody's been through the exact same experience. And I'm aware now that there's certain things that some family members had gone through in their pregnancy that I didn't experience, and then certain things I experienced that no one I had kind of contact with had actually experienced. So it was kind of hard knowing what was normal, what wasn't normal, and things like that. And with the pandemic and everything, there wasn't a lot, and you didn't feel like you had the same support from agencies and from the NHS and things as I suppose you normally would. So and I was at home full time, so it was quite tricky to kind of feel not happy, that's the wrong word, feel like things were going the way that they should do, I suppose. So I've tried my best to remind myself of like my main symptoms and the way that I was feeling, like I say, to document it for myself as well, but also to for other people that may be going through similar things. So it was around January last year when me and my partner decided that we were going to try for a baby, and it turns out that we basically got pregnant. We thought it was like the second month around, but I think with the first try we got our timings wrong. So it does take you a little bit of time to kind of work out your timings and things like that when you're ovulating. So the second lot of trying, we definitely knew that we got the timing right, and we basically got pregnant from that try. So we got pregnant first try really, which I was quite taken aback by, because I'm 31 years old, and at the time I was 30 years old, and I'd never had a scare or like a missed period and things like that, and even though like I suppose everybody's I've probably had situations where I thought it could have happened or mistakes have been made, but I'd never had any scares. So I suppose I was thinking that could this even happen for me? So when I got pregnant pretty much straight away, that was really quite a relief. And the way that I found out I was pregnant was we had been trying, like I say, and I was at work, and one of my first kind of physical signs that I noticed was I'm normally quite hungry when I'm working anyway, and we have I work in a school, so we have a morning break, and so by that morning break I want to have something as a snack. But I was finding that I was absolutely ravenous by the time I got to morning break, and then I couldn't kind of feel that hunger. So then by lunch I was absolutely starving again, and then by the time I was going home I was starving again, and I just felt like I was constantly hungry at that very beginning part, but I didn't even know if I was pregnant yet or not. So I kind of had an inkling, but if I was pregnant, it would have only been a few weeks pregnant by this point. So I thought, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself and test too early. I want to wait until the missed period time before I test so that I'm not getting my hopes up or getting my hopes shattered when actually I want to be doing the test when it's definitely going to give me the right result. So yeah, I was very hungry and I was quite tired. Um, so I saw that as a little bit of a sign, and someone at work did actually say to me, "You couldn't be pregnant, could you?" When I said that I was really hungry. So I was like, "Oh, maybe I am." So we weren't going to be testing or anything, and then all the stuff with COVID and lockdown kind of was creeping in, and people were talking about, oh, we might not be coming into work, and no one really knew what was happening. But the Monday that Boris announced that we were going into full lockdown, when I'd come home from work that Monday, I then instantly said to my partner, right, I know it's a bit earlier than we said, but we need to do a test because they're saying that pregnant people shouldn't be in work. So we had some tests luckily. So I went and did one, and it turns out that I was pregnant. So the next day I was like, do I come into work? Do I not come into work? And obviously, like a lot of you know, it was a bit like everything was a bit hazy at the beginning. Like people didn't really know like exactly what to do with themselves when the beginning of lockdown started. So I was told, oh yeah, come into work, and then we're going to have a staff meeting about it today. So, and the actual lockdown wasn't kicking into the following Monday. He'd announced it that Monday, but it wasn't kicking into the following Monday. So went into work, we had a meeting at the end of the day, and basically they outlined all the exact things that the whole country was doing. And I was told by my team leader, like, if you want to stay home, if you feel safer to just be at home from today, that's absolutely fine. So I didn't go back in then from that day. And I've actually not been back in since. So I've spent my whole pregnancy at home, either in lockdown or in some kind of restricted capacity, because we've not really gone back to normal yet, have we? So obviously it being a year later now, it's hard to remember the exact like day-to-day feelings, but I know that I quickly kind of came round after a week or two of being at home, probably not even that long. I started to feel the classic morning sickness kind of signs. So I was I was never actually sick, but that didn't make it any easier. So I was constantly nauseous all day long. I never really I might have a let up some days in the evening and at bedtime kind of thing, but then I'd wake up in the morning again feeling sick again, and I'd be sickly at least into the afternoon, if not until tea time, and some days as late as like 8, 9 o'clock at night. So it just kind of was ongoing. I've definitely felt more ill in my life, more sick. I mean, I've had food poisoning and neurovirus and things like that, so you definitely feel sicker, but it was the longevity of it. It was that you felt nauseous and on the verge of sick all the time. Um, you couldn't do much to kind of relieve your symptoms, and it went on for me. It went on for probably a good 2 months, so it just felt never ending. Obviously brings your energy levels way down. That was one of the biggest things for me, just that absolutely no energy because I couldn't eat much. I think if I'd have been getting myself up and going to work or trying to do daily life, then I definitely would have been sick. But because I was able to get up, feel nauseous, and go, right, I'm going to sit on the sofa and watch some TV or read a book or whatever, and nibble on food as the day goes on, I was able to put that sickness as a top priority, whereas I think if I'd have been at work and things, you're trying to drive, you're trying to do your job, and you're trying to put food in your mouth when you get the seconds to. So I would have definitely been sick, and it would have been so much harder. So I feel actually quite grateful that I was in lockdown at this point, because it was just so hard. Um, People kept saying to me, once you get to the 12-week point, you will feel loads better. Well, I got to 12 weeks and I didn't really feel any better. It was still going and going, but still hadn't been sick. So for me, I think it went on to about 16 weeks. And then it kind of just, over the space of a day or two, just kind of felt like it had lifted. So yeah, it was a hard couple of months. I mean, at the same time, you're getting a lot of I was getting a lot of soreness in my breasts because all the kind of blood and everything's going to them, and they're growing. And what else? I was getting sciatic pain down my right hand butt cheek. So I thought, oh, you know, I'm only early in pregnancy. I've not even got a belly yet. Why have I got aching pains in my bottom and my back? And it was obviously my changing, whether you're slim or whether you're big, your changing body is still changing. So as things are stretching and pulling, it can catch certain nerves, is what the way it was explained to me. So it would kept catching my sciatic nerve, so I had to be careful not to kind of irritate that at times. So I could do jobs and things, but nothing for long periods of times, otherwise that would start hurting. And I was getting the ligament pains on the front of my stomach as well, and I was getting them from the beginning really, and I thought, they were very similar to period pains, so I thought, oh, am I coming on my period? Or, you know, and you kind of get quite anxious about, is baby okay, am I miscarrying or anything like that. So I never had you know, I never got overwhelmed with them kind of feelings, but you know, if you only get twitches and pains, and you kind of, it can be quite worrying. So, and then when you're feeling sick at the same time, you've got a low mood and you're tired, like that was quite tricky. And I got ligament pain in my stomach for most of pregnancy, so them pangs aren't nice to feel. They're not. You think, oh, is everything okay in there? But eventually I went for my 8-week appointment and then my 12-week scan, and you find out slowly that things are okay. But yeah, it can be quite worrying, because especially because you can't, at the beginning, you can't feel any kicks, or there's no signs that baby's in there and is okay. So it feels really good once you eventually start to get them checked and you're finding out that things are going well. Another thing I meant to mention, when I was getting morning sickness and stuff, it was mainly a sickly feeling, and it was hard to keep food in my stomach. So I knew I couldn't overeat, but equally I couldn't have an empty stomach. And one of the best pieces of advice that I had from someone I worked with was, just never let your stomach be empty. So even though you don't want your stomach to be full, because that was just, oh, that was horrible feeling, and I would have been sick. I could just never let it be empty. So I would start grazing, which was again what a really good piece of advice, just to kind of eat little bits and often. And I think little and often, to me, I thought, oh, I've got to eat things like proper food, basically meals, but eat it a little bit at a time. But actually, what I found best in the end, and you're not getting much nutrients and stuff, but the midwives and things didn't seem too worried. This is said as long as you're having something. So what I ended up having a lot was like rice cakes or crackers. And I'm gluten intolerant as well, so it's quite tricky to find certain things. I think a lot of people could probably keep down bread and toast, whereas I was having like gluten-free crackers. And I set an alarm on my phone for every hour to make sure I ate something every hour, because you just don't feel like eating at all. You don't want to eat, and you have to force food down a lot of the time, even if it's just a couple of crackers. It feels horrible to actually put something into your stomach, but that putting a little bit into your stomach saves a lot of uncomfortableness in the grand scheme of things, because you never feel great, but you feel better for having a little bit in there than you would if you had nothing or if you had too much in there. So that was one of the best things that I did. Another thing that I also had around that time was a lot of gas and bloating, and I thought, oh God, this is going to be horrendous as I go through pregnancy. I'm going to get this as I grow, and I'm going to get heartburn and things like that. And actually, going forward in pregnancy, I didn't get as much of this. But at the beginning, when I was experiencing morning sickness, either alongside morning sickness or instead of, I was getting a lot of very bloated, hard, trapped pains in my stomach, high up in my stomach, and a lot of like, you know, trapped gas, and it's just a debilitating pain where you can't function. So the odd days, like at the weekend, me and my partner would go out to go for a walk somewhere because we were only allowed to go local and things like that, and then I'd just be in agony from the gas pains if it wasn't from feeling sick. So it did definitely feel like it felt like a long haul of all these different things with my body, and I was just like, I don't know if I can get through this, but I did. So I went for my 12-week scan, and I've got to be honest, that was probably one of the most amazing moments of my pregnancy, because it just was amazing to see this little life that's inside of you that looks like a fully formed human being, but in miniature. I just couldn't believe at 12 weeks how well formed this little being was inside me. I honestly thought I was going to see this little bean or a little blob, but actually he was so much more well put together. And then you kind of start to understand the sickness then. It's like, no wonder you feel so horrible when you've gone from having having no being in there to having this embryo that's attached itself onto your body, has actually created a placenta in that time, and then he's grown to the point where it's actually gone from a blob of cells to a being already, to a little miniature human being. And I feel like in the whole of the pregnancy, although obviously baby grows and puts on pressure in different places and things like that, but that seemed like the biggest leap of any of it. To go from cells to a being in 12 weeks was just mind blowing. Unfortunately, my husband, although he did feel that way when he saw the picture, he didn't get to come to the scan. So I got this kind of overwhelming feeling of seeing him moving and, you know, welling up, but my partner couldn't be with me because of lockdown. So that was quite hard. But he was just as proud and amazed by the pictures and excited. So we coped quite well with it, really. At my 12-week scan, they couldn't actually do the check for some of the checks. I think it was for Down syndrome and some of the other syndromes that are much rarer. So they said if I wanted to go for the blood tests separately, and I booked that in, and then they said you can always change your mind if you don't want to do it. And I've got to say, I had like a little bit of a discussion with my partner where I did get a bit upset about, well, do we want to know or do we not want to know? Because if I know, what will I do with that information? I'm sure most people go through the same thing. And we'd kind of just decided on it, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So we did do the test, and if it came to it and we found out some information, then we'd think about what we'd do, rather than not finding out at all. Luckily, I got my letter back a couple of weeks after the test, and everything was fine. So, and I was very, very low risk. So that's a big relief as well. Eventually, after all of this roller coaster up and down of the first trimester and lockdown and all of that, I eventually reached my second trimester. And I'd say this is when I properly started to feel a bit more myself again. When people say like you feel absolutely amazing, like you're floating, I didn't quite feel like that, because obviously you do feel different to what you would do normally. So I didn't feel any more energetic or lighter than I would do when I'm not pregnant, but I felt better than I did in the first trimester, and markedly so. So definitely you feel there's a big improvement. Started to have like a growing bump, which was nice, and I actually it really liked my bump and liked what was happening to my body, so that was nice to see. And I, my body on the whole was doing better, but I was getting some headaches and I was getting kind of tiredness on and off. I was trying to do more and go more, and obviously as lockdown lessened, I was trying to like go and see friends and do different things a bit more. But I would definitely notice a big change in how quickly I would get tired, and because I'd obviously had this weight I was hanging around, carrying around that I wasn't carrying around before, and I did start to get a lot of lower back pain when I was doing anything for a good period of time. Like me and my partner decided to do up the garden at one point, and just using a rake or using a brush. I just couldn't do it for more than about 5 minutes because my back would really start killing me. I remember I was one night I got up in the middle of the night because my back was aching so much. I think I was about 23 weeks pregnant. Aching so much that I couldn't sleep and I couldn't get in any position that was comfortable at all. And so I ended up going down and getting on the sofa and just kind of tossing and turning and put a hot water bottle there and did different things until I eventually was able to get a couple of hours sleep. But I was losing quite a bit of sleep at certain points because of back pains, and then you've also got the added thing of needing a toilet more and things like that, so you do start to wake up more in the night at this point. Well, I did, and I no longer was kind of getting a solid 8 hours sleep every night anymore. I'd say around this time was when I had probably one of my lower points of pregnancy. On the whole, I did deal quite well with pregnancy and all the ups and downs and lockdown and everything like that. I'd say I did really well, really. But I remember it just felt like in quick succession I saw quite a few things when I was about 24, 25 weeks pregnant that were talking about miscarriages and things happening to babies in birth. So I was watching an episode of Super Nanny, for example, and there was a lady on there who had ended up going into labour at 24 weeks and the baby only survived a couple of days. So that was very sad. And then I watched, I was watching Vikings, and at one point in that, this lady's pregnant. She does go into battle, so a bit silly, but she ends up losing her baby, and she's about 18, 20 weeks pregnant. And I ended up, for some reason, me and my partner ended up watching Pan's Labyrinth. If anybody else is pregnant, do not watch Pan's Labyrinth when you're pregnant. I've never seen it before. Worst idea ever. But all these kind of things were happening in quite quick succession. So I ended up kind of having it on my mind about miscarriage and about going into early labour and what would happen. And it made me very anxious at this point. And I think because lockdown and things was easing, which was great, the odd time when it was when they were doing the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, and we did try and go out to restaurants a couple of times, things like that. And I just was finding myself feeling like worried that I'd done so well so far, and did I want to go back out into the world and risk something happening? So I think, and I think that's completely understandable with all that was going on, all the kind of barrage of stuff on the news. I completely avoided the news, to be honest, and just had to concentrate on myself and my own well-being. But it did make it quite tough to stay in this kind of positive, upbeat, let's look on the bright side kind of mindset when everything is coming at you, saying that all the stuff that can go wrong. So yeah, I'd say that was probably my lowest point of pregnancy, and it took me a few weeks really to start to feel an improvement in that. And I think part of that was getting to the 28-week mark and starting to feel that I was over the hardest part and into the home stretch. And if the baby was born, then it was going to be it was going to be healthy, and it was good. Well, it would have been small, but hopefully most babies past that point do survive, even if they do need help and intervention. So that starts to feel better. I think another contribution to that was I started to feel my baby move very early on. So it was about 17 weeks when I started feeling, which was just amazing, because you do start to get then like the positive things. And it was not long after I'd stopped feeling sickly. So it was like a real turning point. But it was very small little flutters. And then them flutters slowly started to turn into more like popping, and then more into kicks later on. But because I felt him so early on, I think it was a great thing, but also maybe can make you a little bit more anxious, because you might feel them and then not feel them for a few days, or and then as it moves on, I think you get used to them moving each day, and then sometimes you might not feel them for most of the day, and that can be quite hard to deal with. I remember at one point I was going to the supermarket with my mother-in-law, and we've been doing a few bits that day, and we pulled up in the supermarket car park, and I just it popped into my head like, oh my God, I've not felt him move. While we've been busy, they do say that you don't feel it as much while you're moving around and while you're busy. But I definitely had noticed that day, like, I've not quite felt him, oh, he'll move soon. And then it was about 6 o'clock in the afternoon when we got to the supermarket, and I noticed that I just hadn't felt him all day since about 8 o'clock that morning. And you do start to question yourself, like, did I actually feel him, or was it just indigestion or something? I might not have felt him since yesterday. And you start to worry yourself. So my mother-in-law looked at me, she's like, are you okay? You look white as a sheet, you look like I've seen a ghost. And I was like, I've not felt him move. And I just burst into tears, and that was just overwhelming, because she asked me if I was okay, then that brings forward their emotions, doesn't it? And so I just sat there in the car, just like, I don't know if he's okay, I can't feel him. And again, I think I was about 25, 26 weeks, so it's that in-betweeny part that I'm struggling a little bit more mentally, and struggling with that, whether you could feel him or not, and if he was okay. And she said, come on, we'll go in the supermarket, we'll have a little wander around, hopefully the movement will make him move or something, and then if you've still not felt anything, we'll call the midwife or someone when we get back. So we went in the supermarket, and about halfway around the supermarket, with my eyes welling up, eventually I felt something. And again, you do go, is it him moving? Is it, or is it just, but it was enough to make me feel satisfied that actually, yeah, he's in there and he's okay. I also went for my 20-week scan, which all went pretty well. It wasn't as clear as the 12-week one, because they are bigger, and then they don't fully fit onto the screen as well. He was fast asleep and looking in the opposite direction, so I didn't really kind of get to see very much. But as a result of that as well, it meant that she couldn't get all the scans and things that she needed to, and all the measurements, sorry, I think it was, for that. So I had to come back a couple of weeks later to get the final measurements done. And luckily that was all okay. Moving on to my third trimester. So after the kind of rockiness of the second part of my second trimester, in the third trimester, like I said before, you feel that relief of the 28 weeks. I'm on the home straight. It'll be fine. It'll be probably okay if anything was to happen and he was to come early. So I had a couple of weeks of kind of feeling like this, and then from about 30 weeks, I definitely started to feel that the physical side of pregnancy from that point. So Castor was for me, it was right up in my ribs from about 30 weeks. Some part of his body, I think it was his feet and knees, were right up in my ribs, and it felt like indigestion, but like it was squishing your organs, and it would actually make them go numb. So it almost felt like there was like nothing, I don't know, like you couldn't feel your stomach in a way because everything was so numb and sore in that spot. Um, and it grew as well. It got worse and worse as I went further on. But I started with it from about 30 weeks. And this rib pain meant that I struggled to sit for a prolonged time. So how you sit, and if you imagine as you sit in your ribs kind of that your upper body kind of goes downwards into your stomach a bit. Well, if I did that, my ribs would compress down into my bump, and then the bump would come up into my ribs, and everything was just getting squished and sore. So I would have to lie down a lot of the time. So I was spending a lot of time laying down on the sofa or laying over my ball, which I found such a lovely relief. So if you had the pregnancy ball and then I was laying over the top, and it meant my bump was kind of dangling in this gap here. So, and it kind of push everything forward rather than it all being up in your ribs. So that felt so good. But you couldn't really do that all day long because then your back would start hurting. So I did have to kind of keep changing positions. Me and my partner were going on daily walks at lunchtime because luckily it was quite nice weather. So we were going on daily walks. I could only do about a 10-minute walk without my pelvic area starting to feel pressure and starting to need to go to the bathroom. But these 10-minute walks were really helpful. And it meant, again, everything kind of would come out of my ribs because I'd be walking around and kind of stretching upwards rather than everything compressing downwards. I definitely started to struggle with sleep. My partner actually ended up around this time going into the nursery and sleeping on the fold-out bed because I was tossing and turning so much. And then obviously I was bigger as well. He's a very light sleeper. He was having to get up for work. It just wasn't working very well. So and to be honest, I felt really good having the space and being able to have a big pregnancy pillow around me. I mean, we do only have a double bed, so it's not very big. And I was able to kind of wake up in the night, and if I was awake and just really struggling to go back to sleep, I could at least sit up or walk around and turn the telly on, do whatever I need to do to kind of get through that without disturbing somebody. Because before that I was kind of going down on and laying on the sofa or walking around the house in the night, which for a pregnant person isn't ideal. So it was good to kind of have that freedom in my own bedroom. So this rib pain went on all the way till the end for me. And at about 37 weeks, it definitely got worse and worse and worse. And I had to do anything I could to kind of relieve the pressure. I couldn't really sit for more than about 5 minutes. So I stopped driving. Probably earlier than that, from about 34 weeks pregnant or something like that. I stopped driving because I couldn't sit in the driving seat. If I went in my husband's car, I'd have the heated seat on, which was amazing, and I'd have it fully, like nearly fully reclined back, so that the pressure wasn't in my ribs. So that was the biggest thing for me towards the end. I also then started to get low down pressure quite a lot towards the end when I was walking around and things like that. So it became really hard to be in any position at all where I didn't feel some pressure, which I think is pretty normal with pregnancy. But yeah, I wasn't just feeling it low down or just high up. It kind of became where I was feeling it in both ends. And I spoke to the midwife when I was about 36, 37 weeks pregnant and said, I'm getting these symptoms, what should I do? And actually, sorry, I'd been to the hospital about 32 weeks pregnant, and the only time I went in to kind of get checked for anything extra, because I was getting such bad rib pain that I thought it could be a sign of something else. Well, luckily it wasn't. It was just he was sat right up in my ribs. So yeah, I spoke to the midwife. She said that the low down pressure was a good thing in a way because it was meant he was probably going downwards. So even though I was uncomfortable, try and be up and creating that pressure as much as possible to try and get him out. My midwives actually had a bit of a bet on with me that he wasn't going to make it to 40 weeks. Like he would be healthy and he'd go past the 37 weeks, but he wasn't going to make it to 40 weeks because he'd run out of space. I mean, I'm only 5'3", and my bump was a good size, and they said his head was down when I went for my, I think it was my 36-week check. So they were like, you know, he's going to be out before 40 weeks. Well, he did end up coming at 39 weeks and I went into labour 39 weeks, 3 days, and he came at 39 weeks, 4 days. So they were right. To add to that, he never actually like dropped. People talk about your bump dropping, and I kept waiting for this to happen. I mean, I was really lucky. I didn't have any stretch marks on my stomach at all, and I was towards the end I started getting some on the sides of my thighs, and that was like one of the only places I hadn't been moisturising. But I already had some like teenage puberty stretch marks from there because all my weight I kind of carry on my hips anyway. So they got worse, but nowhere else got any. And people kept saying, oh, towards the end he'll drop and then you'll get stretch marks on your stomach. And so I was waiting for this to happen. And like I say, with him being right up in my ribs meant actually I kind of wanted him to drop a bit further down. But actually I never had that. He never dropped. So my bump kind of kept growing outwards, and was still quite high up, never really went low down, and he ended up coming in the end. So luckily, I didn't end up actually getting any stomach marks. I did have the ones on my thighs, and after I'd given birth, they were quite prominent. And actually, I noticed the other day that I can't really see them now. So I kind of got away unscathed with that. One more thing that I wanted to say was I actually ended up getting COVID when I was 33 weeks pregnant. So I don't really know how I got it. I'd been staying in and being really careful with my husband who was working from home. I even had friends and people getting us food and going to supermarket. I wasn't going to any shops, any supermarkets, anything like that. I was going out the odd time while we were allowed to, like I say, for like eat out to help out and things like that. But I was doing this in the most careful way I could. Around the time that I actually caught it, I think I've been out maybe twice in the last couple of weeks with my family, and I'd gone to meet them for food. And it was when you were allowed to meet people outdoors but not indoor. Sorry, no, meet them out in a public place but not meet them in your own home. So I felt like to see people and to actually be able to keep sane, I had to go out and spend time in public. I wasn't allowed to have them around to my house. So we went to have a meal a couple of times, but we went to places I knew were going to be A, quieter, B, like more spaced out and doing a good job of kind of the social distancing side of it. So again, with that, we were as careful as we could. The only other things that I was doing was going on walks, but we weren't going near anybody else when we were going on these walks. Going to my midwife appointments, which part of me does think that's possibly where I got it. And the week before, I think it was, I went into the hospital to get myself checked, like I said before, to see if I had preeclampsia. So potentially in the hospital, and it's when the hospitals were at a really bad stage as well, and nobody was wanting to go into the hospitals. And my only other thought was something like post or the postman, something like that, but I don't even know if it's possible to get it from that. So I started with a bad throat, and because I was doing my macrameing, I thought potentially I got some of the fibres on my throat and so I took a break from that and was trying to be careful. But it just got worse and worse. It kind of felt quite raspy. I wasn't really coughing, but felt very dry and raspy. I can't remember exact timings, but I know that I kind of got to a point where my sinuses all behind my eyes and behind my forehead, behind my nose were very stingy where my eyes were watering, and it felt like it was all up here. So the throat actually cleared up after a few days, but then it was all up in here like congestion. What didn't really have a runny nose or anything like that, but it felt really stingy. And then I noticed that I started to not be able to smell things. The reason I realised this was because I was putting Vicks on because it was all in my sinuses and I couldn't smell the Vicks. And now Vicks is the most strong smelling thing. So I realised then like potentially it could be COVID. So until that point I hadn't thought so because I didn't have a fever, I didn't have a cough. It wasn't until I lost my taste and smell. So I ordered a test. Now, the time that I was actually getting this test done was one of the worst times to get it done. I don't know if people remember, but there was a point where the people were complaining that the tests were taking too long to get to them and then taking too long to come for the results to come back. So they were meant to come back within 48 hours and they were taking 4 or 5 days. Well, unfortunately, that's when I got mine done. So I got the test to the house, which did come pretty quick. And then me and my husband had to do it, which wasn't nice. And then we sent it back. But the time between me sending it back, which obviously wouldn't have been picked up from the post box that day, but it took until, well, I can't remember exactly which day of the week I sent it back. It might have been the Tuesday, I think. And I thought, well, I'm going to hear by Friday. That's what I had in my head. So I'm going to know by Friday. So there's no point in worrying myself about it. I will definitely know by Friday. So I didn't really get myself too worked up about it. I was just like, I'll just rest and be careful, and I could still feel baby kicking and everything. So I didn't really think there was too much of a problem. But then eventually it just didn't. The test just didn't arrive back. The results didn't arrive back. Sorry. So it got towards the end of Friday, and I just got really, really upset. I remember it was probably the lowest point of my pregnancy. I remember being in the bath and I was just trying to kind of like be calm about it and things. And I think he was moving because obviously I was so pregnant, but I just kind of ended up calling my husband into the bathroom and saying, I don't feel good about this. Like I want just not knowing's really upsetting me. And I thought I'd know by now. So I think that was what got me, because I thought I'd know by the end of Friday and I didn't. And so it just hit me. And I was like, what if I've got it? And people were saying that negative results come back quicker. So I was like, oh, maybe I am positive, and started to get myself really worked up and upset. So I remember just absolutely in tears, just crying the loudest cries I think I've done in a long time in the bath, just wondering, saying, I hope he's okay. I just want to know he's okay. I just want to know he's okay. So I think it was eventually by like the Sunday that I found out, and it took nearly 5 days in the end, I think, which was just not right really. And I wasn't feeling too ill in myself. Like I say, I just had loss of taste and smell. I was really tired and stinging, but was still able to kind of function. And then I got the text through and it said I was positive, and I was just like, what? Like, where have I even caught it? What's happened? So it was kind of a mix of feelings really, because I felt relieved that I knew what was happening. I actually felt less stressed than I did when I was waiting to find out the results, but then obviously I was stressed I was quite stressed to my husband, thinking like, what do we do? What happens? And if I'm absolutely honest, this is where I felt a little bit let down by the system, because there'd all been all this anxiety inducing fear going around, like, oh, but you need to shield, that needs to happen, you need to be careful if you get it, and don't mix meat up with family and all of that stuff. And then when I got it, I rang my midwives and told them, and people's response was literally, like any professional's response like that, was literally, oh well, speak to you in a few weeks. You can't come to your appointment for one, so they just want you to stay away, which I understand, but you're obviously needing help as well. And it was, see you in 2 or 3 weeks when your next appointment is, if you're, feeling better by then. And that was all I really got. So there was no like, oh, we'll ring you more on a more regular basis. Here's some things you can do at home to check baby's okay, to check things are going well, whatever. There was none of that. It was like, you do not come into for your appointments, do not come into the surgery, don't bother us, really, was kind of the impression I got. No one once ever said, well, if you need to speak to us or you need any support, ring us, or go into the hospital or anything like that. It was, the impression you get is just stay away. So I think that was the worst part of it. So I just wanted to know I didn't have it as soon as I didn't have it. So eventually I ended up kind of going through the motions. I started to get my taste and smell back after about 2.5 weeks, I think it was. So it did linger, but all the other symptoms had kind of gone, and my taste and smell was still, lack of taste and smell was still hanging around. So that's what made me realise that I was still unwell. And then eventually, when I was about 36 weeks pregnant, I took another test off my own back because I wanted to know if it had gone or not. Now I realise that that's not the way you find out if it's gone or not. But at the time, being pregnant, having no support, I just wanted to know if I got rid of it. I actually did a test and it came back negative at that point, at 36 weeks. So I was like, oh, brilliant, thank God. My husband, by the way, had done tests as well, and every time was negative. God knows how that happens, but I had it and he didn't, apparently. And then from there, I just carried on with the rest of my pregnancy. But then eventually, I went in for my labour when I was 39 weeks and 3 days, and you had to do a COVID test at that point as well. So I was like, yeah, whatever, and didn't think twice about it because I'd had it already. I've been negative. And it actually turns out, which I'll go a little bit more into detail about if I do a pregnancy video, a labour video, that they came into the room when I was 9 centimetres dilated, and 9 or 10 centimetres, it all goes into a blur. But it was very towards the end. I'm pretty sure I was pushing, and they came in and said, your COVID test come back positive. And I was like, what the hell is a labouring woman meant to do with that information? Like, I did not understand why they came into the room and announced that to me. Because most of the things the midwives and the doctors are trying to shield you from when you're in labour, they're just telling you what a good job you're doing and all of that. And then anything that's kind of too scary, they will talk about them between themselves or outside of the room. But they felt it was appropriate to come in when I was that far gone and tell me that I came back with COVID positive, which I thought was, anyway. So apparently got it at 33 weeks, was negative at 36 weeks, and then was positive at 39 weeks. So I reckon the whole time that negative in the middle was probably a false negative. Now that we know it stays in your system for 90 days or whatever, isn't it? You'll test positive for 90 days. So I think that's what happened. But then obviously it meant I had to shield and everything again when I just had a baby, which I'll go into more detail about another time. But looking back, it was pretty crazy, really. So yeah, that was the last part of my pregnancy. It was a bit, but again, I think I did pretty well to not let it get to me too much and to just get through my pregnancy in one piece and now have my gorgeous baby boy, and it's all so yeah, that's my story of my pregnancy. And I don't, there's probably other things that I've left out, obviously, like I say, is for over 5 months now, so a lot of this was happening like a year ago, but I do think it really helped me hearing other people's stories, so I'm hoping that my pregnancy stories and experiences will help other people. Thank you very much. Bye.